Wait, White, Sonia, Charlie, Rensquest, Eskin Nation, Staaquin. I'm part of the Shuswap Nation, and in that nation, I'm in the Ginkeknam clan. Hi, my name is Sonia Charlie. I'm from the people of the Broken Rock, which is also Cannon Lake. I am from the Shuswap Nation tribe, also a part of the Bear Clan. I find this assignment very intriguing. I can tie in the things that I enjoy doing as it's become a part of my passion, and although it is kind of geared away from a way of knowing the culture and traditions, but in so I can combine it all into one. So for me, it's definitely a bonus. So here it goes. So at first I spoke in Shuswap, which is a part of my culture, my tradition. It definitely ties in with a few of the readings from the anthology of the Canadian literature, and especially with That All There Is, the tribal literature. So for me, this one speaks about the language and the levels and the meanings and how people come to understand our language, different formats, and it goes on about how the language is, it's part of the language, is also part of the tradition, which one can't be without the other, the language and the culture and tradition. So for me, this hit me pretty big because it has to do with my language, which for me, my first language was actually Shuswap. When I was younger, I was a translator for my great-great-grandmother. For me, I actually wasn't aware that I was a translator. Like, I was still young. But as I was growing up, my mom's dad, my grandfather, I told him, I was a translator for my great-great-grandmother, and he's like, hint, which means granddaughter, grandchild. He says that speaking the language as a first language when you're younger, and then you go to school and you lose the language, he says, don't worry, it's still going to be there. It's in you. It'll come back to you. You just have to continue and regurgitate everything that's taught to you. There are times like I hear it, the language, I hear it spoken, but at the same time it's like at the back of my head I don't know what they're saying, but at the same time it's coming to me what they're saying. And I'll give you a good example. When it was my birthday one year, and I was at this elders group, and they're all Shuswap, all spoke Shuswap. All the fluent speakers, they were all there in a circle. We had to stand there, and my mom, she stepped forward, she says she says this in Shuswap. Of course, I don't know the Shuswap version, but I kind of knew she was talking about me because she was saying, turned out it was my birthday. She was telling everybody in Shuswap, and she was saying, can we sing her happy birthday in the Shuswap version? So I kind of knew she was talking about me because all of a sudden they started singing. That's just an example of how the language is kind of coming back to me. But at the same time, it's a complicated language which they speak about in this book. And she goes into detail about the language, and for me it's similar. I'm learning my language. I find it is difficult, but at the same time it's not. Like, there's different aspects to learning my language, which for me is the written portion, and then there's listening to the different dialect. And I come home, and then I talk to my mom because she's fluent. She knows the language. I show her, she looks at it, she tells me I'm a backwards child because my language is I'm from the northern Shuswap, which is a different dialect than the southern. So I'm down here at TRU and I'm learning the southern style. So it is a little bit backwards, but I because she knows it, she can read it, she can translate it, and even though it's backwards, I'm still learning it. Anyway, that's my little speech on the language and how it affects me today. I mean, I'm still learning. I have a common law partner, and he's an entire different language as well. So we're kind of learning each other's language at the same time too. Another example is it kind of relates to this short story by Basil Johnston, and it literally made me think about when I was talking to another student at TRU. He's an international student, but back home he was a lawyer, and because he told me he's taking some kind of class, some business related, and in his class, they actually talked about the Shuswap. He told me this, that, oh, your language is dying, and, it's going to die within 100 years, and because he's a lawyer, he has that mentality to argue his case, kind of. And I sat there, and I told him he's wrong, so basically we just sat there and kind of argued and debated, and he just wouldn't let it go. And neither would I, because I'm trying to bring back the language. I'm trying to learn as much as I can, and I'm actually in the classes. I was a teaching assistant with the Shuswap language. We have a website, and that's how it panned out, and it means something to me, that the language. And I spoke to an elder, and she said, the kids know the language more than the adults, the parents. It's good to hear that, but, because the parents are obviously a part of the generations that are intergenerational. It's like a constant, because they were colonized, or, the parents had the language stripped away from them from the residential school. And then, at some point, some time ago, my parents told me that we almost lost our culture. We almost lost, our way of knowing. The only thing that stuck was the language. And then we had to seek out with all the other Shuswap nations. There are 17 bands. They all came together and brought it back, our culture and our tradition. And that's kind of how my life is, because I was brought up with culture, tradition, hunting, fishing, trapping, berry picking, canning, regalia making, going to powwows, power dancing, and stick games, which for me is a major whole culture, all the traditions. I was brought up with all of it. And, I always wondered why I was being taught all these different ways. Now, that I've come into my own, I've gone to TRU, taken some classes, and there's something bigger than, being a part of that culture and tradition. And which brings me to Richard Wagamese. They were talking about residential school also, and how it affected him, and how it's definitely affected me. Like, I can talk about examples of being pushed away from my culture and tradition, and for me, I came to Kamloops, I go to university, I have these student passes that gets us into the pool and sauna. So I started going to the sauna, and this happened to me twice. I'm constantly going. I'm going to the sauna. Then I talked to a friend of mine, and he's like, "What's a sauna?" Right? And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "You know, the place where you go to sit in a hot room." And I explained the sauna. You just sit there and sweat. And he's like, "Oh, you're talking about a sweat lodge." I said, "Yeah, but that's not what they call it. They call it sauna." He's like, "No." He's like, "You better check yourself. You're losing your," how did he put it? "You're losing your ways. You need to come back. They're called sweat lodges." And that shocked me because it was true. I was like, clearly, the word sauna and sweat lodge, they're just similar, but at the same time, they mean something else to, their title alone. And then another time I talked to another friend and they said the same thing. They're like, "Oh, you're talking about a sweat lodge." I was like, "Yeah, but it's a sauna." And, we did the same thing and reverted back, like vice versa. I was just like, they're the same thing. It's the same concept. They have different titles, but the same meaning. And that's just kind of how it turned out. It all ties in to the, Richard Wagney and Basil Johnson. Clearly, it just kind of, it hit me like, yeah, this is what's happening. This is what's gonna happen. This is, like, clearly I'm being affected being here and kind of losing my ways. I'm still here, I'm still First Nations, but all the concepts of culture and tradition are still in me. They're there. It's just like the language. It's still there. It's in me. It's at the back of my head. It'll always remain there. But because I have to go to school, in order to get a job, I need to get some type of degree. So that's what I'm doing. And in doing that, it's actually I'm actually enjoying the what I'm learning at TRU, but in a way I still feel like the part of me is still home. So when I go home, it brings it all back because that's where the memories are. And I will something I do every other year, but it's getting to be less and less that I go home. These readings, these short stories, there's always something in them that hit me, that make me realize that, our culture and tradition is, it's important. It always will be. The language too. And that's what we are doing. We have annual language conferences. We have powwows. We have game tournaments. It's getting bigger. We're making our name out there. Stem, erase, that's it. Wait, white, Sonia, Charlie, Rensquest, Eskin Nation,